be screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of, What If Ichigo Enters Attack on Titan? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Disco Stew 09 on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Inside the Soul King's throne room, it was a large, at least a kilometer in length, plain white room, large circular windows on the wall and pictures of different Shinigami that had served the Soul Society well in their years of service. There was also a large golden chair, where two figures. One sat comfortably in the golden chair and the other was kneeling to him a few meters away. I am sure you have heard the somber news, Kisukurahara. The figure in the chair said solemnly. He slicked back dark hair, oval eyes with black sclera and unusual pupils and very thin eyebrows. He was the Soul King and he was the most powerful being in existence. Yes. The man known as Kisukurahara responded sadly. He was a tall, lean-built man with light skin and gray eyes. His hair is messy and light blonde with strands framing the sides of the face. He wore a brown coat, which sported a white diamond pattern along its bottom half, with a dark green shirt and pants underneath. He also wore brown sandals and a green and white striped bucket hat. Despite the fact that he was a royal guard member, he still wore the look that he gained from his exile in the living world. How many years has it been since Ichigo Kurosaki first entered the Soul Society? The Soul King pondered out loud. Several thousand years if I recall. I can't quite work out the exact amount. Kisuk replied lightly. And now he has passed on. If he accepted the position to become a royal guard then he would still be with us. The Soul King noted unhappily. When accepting a position in the royal realm, the Shinigami would gain eternal life and could only die in battle. Eternal life in the service of the Soul King. And leave all his friends back at Soul Society and Hueco Mundo. All Ichigo cared about was the protection of his friends and family. Leaving them to join the Royal Guard was completely against his character, a character that we all came to admire and respect. Urahara replied. He and Yoruchi had accepted positions in the royal realm a few centuries after the war against the Quincy's. Yeah, he was certainly unique, in more ways than one. Yet he never became the captain commander. How interesting. Shinigami. Hollow. Foolbringer. Quincy, there was no one else in existence that was like him. The Soul King mused before his face turned thoughtful, at least that was what Kisuk thought. Before he pondered out loud, I can't help but wonder. Wonder about what? Kisuk asked, unable to hold his curiosity. He knew why Ichigo never became the commander despite easily being powerful enough to claim the position. The commander was always the last line in Soul Society's defense and that is where Yamamoto screwed up and ended up being killed by Yhwach. Ichigo was a fighter though. He would always throw himself into a fight if it meant protecting his friends and family. He just wasn't suited to the position and so he took over the 13th Division once his human life ended and Yukitake handed it over. The Soul King's eyes snapped sharply towards Kisuk and he commanded, "Stand next to me, Kisuk." Kisuk in a flash of Shuanpa appeared to the right side of the Soul King. The strongest being in creation merely snapped his fingers and the room suddenly began to shake violently. Kisuk watched in awe as the place he was recently standing began to break away and in only a few moments, the floor before the Soul King was gone. Instead there was a large pool and inside were small bluish-white ball of energy swimming about. Do you know how deep this pool is, Kisuk? The Soul King asked the eccentric ex-shopkeeper and received a negative shake of the head. It is endless. It doesn't have a bottom. The reason for this is because this is the reincarnation pool. The reincarnation pool. Kisuke repeated in awe. His scientific explanations flew through his mind at an unbelievable rate. No one had ever seen what he was seeing except for the Soul King. Every soul that is to be reincarnated travels through here before being put back down to the living world. As I am sure you have already figured out, this pool is in a separate dimension than the one that we are currently in. Do you know how long one stays inside of this pool before they're reincarnated? I don't know, it wouldn't make sense to have a set time. Kisuke replied, I'd imagine that it would somehow be random. That is correct, we can't have some souls that died be reincarnated within a time where his face and identity is recognizable, can we? Some might stay in this pool for centuries before they are finally reincarnated. Why are you showing me this? Kisuke questioned him suspiciously. No one, not even the former commander of the royal guard, had seen this. So why are you showing it to me now? The Soul King didn't answer, and instead he rose out of his throne, and with a simple gesture of his right index finger, one of the souls flew into his hand. Kisuke's eyes narrowed slightly when the color of the soul changed to black for an instant before reverting back to its natural bluish-white. This is his. The Soul King announced, this is Ichigo Kurosaki's soul. Kisuke's eyes widened worriedly and he demanded protectively, what are you going to do? Ichigo was his protege after all. What kind of mentor would he be if he didn't do anything to protect him? I am going to reincarnate him personally. The Soul King replied honestly. I see. Kisuke murmured before realizing, it has been thousands of years since he was last among the living, so no one will ever consider him being the reincarnation of Ichigo. Not to mention the odds that his reincarnation has any spiritual power is astronomical, and so when he crosses over to the Soul Society once again, he probably won't be a Shinigami. The Soul King nodded and then told him, that would be correct, if Ichigo Kurosaki went through a normal reincarnation. Kisuke's eyes turned deadly. What are you saying? Just what are you planning? There is something that I am curious about. The Soul King responded, and with a click of his fingers, the floor returned to its natural state. I am going to have him reincarnated into another universe. I will send him into a different Earth than the one that we are aware of. Kisuke blinked in confusion. Today had been the first day in centuries that he had felt genuine confusion. Why would you do that? The Soul King didn't respond, and instead he walked to the left of the room, directly in line with his throne, and with a wave of his free hand a screen appeared in thin air. It was similar to the ones that Ulquiorra used in the Dangai when he convinced Orihime Inoue to come with him to Hueco Mundo. In the screen, Kisuke saw a large wall that held humans inside of it, and he could see large giant naked humans without any reproductive organs against the wall, unable to get past it. In this world about 107 years ago, these giant things that you see are known as titans, and they wiped out most of humanity. Humanity has no idea where they came from and what their purpose is and why humans are the only ones that they devour. Somehow humanity was able to build these walls. Some fools believe it was by God, and they have lived in peace for 100 years. However, these walls won't be able to hold them forever. The war between humanity and titans will resume once again. No, that wording is incorrect. The extermination of humanity will continue. That is why I am going to send Ichigo Kurosaki there, to hopefully help turn the tide. I see. But Ichigo will not even have his powers, and he will be a normal human like them. A large part, no, the biggest part of why Ichigo commanded such respect was because he had the power to back up his character. Even if his character is exactly the same as the Ichigo we knew, which it won't be because he will grow up differently, he will be useless without his power. Kisuke protested. I know, and that is why he will retain some of his powers. You saw it for a moment, didn't you? When his soul turned black for a moment. That was me returning some of his powers. When he came here, like everyone that comes here, I make sure I take a sample of their spiritual power for this very reason. The King of Souls explained to him. Kisuke took note of the key word in that explanation, some. Of course, I can't just give him all of his powers, he would decimate these titans with ease. The Soul King replied easily. I thought that was the point of sending him there. To wipe them out. No. That is just one of the possible outcomes. The reason that I am restricting the amount of power he possesses is actually quite simple. To answer my curiosity. How do you mean? This isn't the first time I have done something like this, Kisuke. I send them because I want the answer to some of my questions. Yes, Kisuke, even I have questions that I want answered. So far, all of them have let my expectations of them down. I hope Ichigo Kurosaki can finally prove it to me. Prove what? Kisuke asked interestedly. The Soul King didn't answer. Instead, the screen suddenly zoomed in into a house within one of the towns located on the outer wall. It went even further into a private room where two people, a male and a female, were currently engaged in adult activities. Kisuke couldn't help but giggle perversely at the scene while the Soul King looked on emotionlessly. The Soul King released the soul in his hands and watched it be sucked into the screen and entered the woman the moment the male released into her. The screen suddenly shut down and Kisuke glanced at the Soul King and he couldn't help but wonder if the Soul King was just a mega pervert. Did you notice the faces of those two, or were you too distracted? The Soul King asked unamused at Kisuke's reaction. He didn't understand the joy people got looking on at others mating. To him it was simply something that had to be done to reproduce, nothing more. They looked very similar to Isshin and Masaki, but I did notice some differences. Kisuke responded. I took notice of this world 100 years ago and have slowly been setting up for the arrival of Ichigo Kurosaki. So someone that looks similar to his parents just happened to get together? Kisuke asked skeptically. There isn't much I can't do, Kisuke. It isn't just coincidence either that the man's surname is Kurosaki. The Soul King informed him, and now, hopefully I will finally see if he is the one. Is there any point in me asking again? Kisuke asked, frustration clear in his voice. The Soul King looked over to the large portrait of Ichigo Kurosaki that hung behind the throne. It was the only one on that wall. It had him in the different stages of his power. He was the only being that had such radical changes to his powers. Is the Ichigo Kurosaki we know one of a kind? If he is put into a darker world, filled with more misery and pain than the one that he was originally in, will he still rise up to be a hero? Or will he succumb to the darkness of the world and fall into despair? Or maybe he will give into his hatred and become a monster. Every single one that I have done, and I have done plenty, have not been the same as the hero they previously were. Will Ichigo Kurosaki be the one to do it? Can he rise above everything and help take back the world? Is his soul naturally born to be a hero? Shiganshina District. We have a boy, a baby boy. A man with short black spiky hair and brown eyes said in awe, looking down at his son in his arms. The newborn stared back up at his father, and the man could see his son inheriting his mother's hair color and his eye color. There was something in his eyes though that drew him in. As if his son would have a large purpose in this world. Then again, he assumed all fathers had that feeling. Can I hold him? His wife asked, pleading. Her husband smiled at her and gently handed her the baby, and she cradled him carefully with a loving smile on her face. He is so appealing. What should we call him? The baby's father, Satoshi, knew what he wanted to call his son. He knew from the moment that he looked into his child's eyes. He smiled at his wife Izumi. How about we call him Ichigo? You want to call our son Strawberry? Izumi giggled in amusement. Satoshi didn't laugh, in fact he looked determined. No, Ichi for one and Go for guardian. One guardian. To protect one thing. I think that is a great name. Ichigo. Izumi murmured pleasantly, holding her son closely. I like it. Hello to you, my darling, Ichigo. Ichigo Kurosaki. It's time to wake up, Ichigo. You need my power. Call out my name before it's too late. Call out my name. A young boy's eyes snapped open and he wildly looked around the room for the strange voice that had been calling out for him. Like in previous weeks, there was no one in the room. He had been hearing the voice for the last few weeks, but this time it was a lot more urgent. He didn't understand what the hell was going on, but he decided to pass it off as a weird dream once again. He sat up on his bed and groggily rubbed his eyes to try and rid himself of his lingering sleepiness. A couple of slams on his bedroom door drew his attention and he heard his younger sister shout out, "Ichi! It's time for breakfast. I'm coming. I'm coming." Ichigo assured her before heading into his own private bathroom. He slept in the MSTR bedroom that his parents had before they died. His father had been struck down by that terrible plague that had hit mankind, and unfortunately his father's best friend and colleague, Erenyeager, had discovered the cure just a little too late. Things took another turn for the worst a year later when his mother had been kidnapped by a group of slavers, but she had been killed when they tried to take his younger sisters. He had been out for some groceries at the time with his BLD hound named Kai, a name that his sisters picked out, and he had come home to a bloody house and his mother's corpse. He grabbed the family dato, and thanks to Kai tracking Akira and Tsukiko's scents and his father's horse he was able to find them. There had been 6 of them in total and he had been able to take down 3 of them with some help from Kai, but unfortunately Kai had been killed. Ichigo had a blank memory of what happened next, but somehow another 2 of them were dead and his dato was destroyed. The last thing that he could remember was the crooked smirk on one of the men's face before it all went blank. Just when he was about to be killed by the last remaining man, Mikasa had interfered and she killed them. His sisters had been unconscious at the time and Ichigo had asked Mikasa afterwards what happened, but she hadn't seen it as she had been facing the other way at the time. Of course, Mikasa was rather numb for a while, so she hadn't noticed much until Ichigo needed her help. Since then, thanks to a friend of his mother's, Ichigo was able to get a job at a blacksmith's and he began learning the craft. He didn't plan on doing this forever. Soon he would be old enough to be recruited and he would learn to be a soldier. He aspired to join with the military police, much to his friend Eren's displeasure. He had told Eren why he wanted to join and he knew that his friend understood, but he still didn't like it. Eren had no respect for the military police or the garrisons. He believed that they were all soft and weak because they lived as if they were cattle, content in being caged inside the large walls. He couldn't disagree with Eren, however he didn't care about fighting the Titans or seeing what was outside of the walls. There was only one thing that he cared about: protecting his younger sisters. If he managed to get into the military police, then he could take his sister into the interior, which was the safest place that they could be. Ichigo knew that while the walls had never been breached in over 100 years, he couldn't be too careful. They knew nothing about the Titans. It was best to assume that someday the Titans will somehow breach the walls so they could prepare. Unfortunately, the garrisons lived in a fantasy world where they believed that it was impossible for the Titans could get inside the walls. Ichigo couldn't rely on them to protect him and his sisters. Ichigo knew from experience that everything could change quickly. One moment his parents were alive and happy and the next day his dad was dead from the plague. If Ichigo got his sisters into the interior, behind the safety of the wall Sina, then the Titans would have to get past walls Maria and Rose before they were a threat. Ichigo looked into the bathroom mirror after he washed and changed into his work clothes. He has orange spiky hair, brown eyes, and he wore a cheap white shirt and brown pants. As he headed out of his bathroom towards the kitchen where his sisters were, his thoughts turned back to Eren. He had met Eren when he was 4 due to the partnership that his father and Grisha had, and they got along pretty well. Unlike him, Eren desired to escape the walls and defeat the Titans. He respected Eren's aspirations despite Eren not liking his. Mikasa understood his intentions though. Ichigo smiled slightly whenever he thought about his new friend that had come into his life. She had come in under horrific circumstances and her strength of will constantly amazed him. She had been adopted in the Jaeger household and she had woven into the family's chemistry as if she had been a part of it from the start. Some might find it creepy at how protective of Eren she is but not him. He understood perfectly why she was obsessed with protecting him. Mikasa couldn't bear the prospect of losing any more family, just like how he couldn't bear the thought of losing his sisters. He and Mikasa were able to understand and connect with each other in a way that Eren couldn't understand. He knew that if Mikasa could, then she would take Eren as far into Wall Sina as she could. However, she cared about him too much to force him into something like that. Instead, she would follow Eren wherever he went so that she could protect him. Just before he headed to the kitchen, he walked over to the desk next to his bed and picked up two items on it. One was a pendant and the other was a bracelet. The pendant had a pure white stone in the shape of a heart being held together by some red rope. The bracelet was made from thin black chains. He placed the bracelet on his right wrist before putting on his pendant. They were gifts that his sisters had made for him for his last birthday. Akira had made the pendant and Tsukiko had made the bracelet. In fact, Tsukiko had made two bracelets, but he had given one to Mikasa when they met. They didn't have the money to buy each other gifts, but Ichigo treasured these two items more than anything and he wore them every day. He entered the kitchen to see both his younger sisters sitting at the table eating some rolls for breakfast. His sisters were both 6 years old, with Akira being the oldest and Tsukiko was the youngest. Akira had long black hair tied into a ponytail and she had blue eyes. She wore a long white and red one-piece dress along with a white apron. Not long after she had turned 6 she began doing the housework. However, Ichigo wouldn't let her cook anything hot. That was his and their uncle's job whenever he came over. Akira was a happy child and whenever she had the chance she would rope Ichigo into playing with her. Tsukiko wasn't as cheerful as her twin sister and she was far more independent. She kept her black hair reasonably short but nothing too drastic, and she had blue eyes. Unlike Akira, who liked to wear dresses, Tsukiko wore a yellow shirt and black trousers. Tsukiko already had a goal that she wanted to achieve and she was older, and that was to join the military. "Good morning, brother," Akira said happily when he entered the room. "Morning." Ichigo smiled back at his sister and sat down. "Has uncle already gone to work?" "Yeah, he left an hour ago," Akira told him. "That's 2 weeks in a row he has stayed the night, isn't it?" Ichigo asked them. He really needs to get a girlfriend. Their uncle stayed over at their house almost every day since their mother had died and he had been a big help to Ichigo. "I hope he does. We need more girls here," Akira shouted dramatically. Tsukiko shrugged. "I'd prefer Ichi to bring Mika over more." Suddenly Akira's eyes turned into stars and she gasped passionately to Tsukiko, completely ignoring Ichigo. "Just imagine if brother marries Mika when they grow up. Then she will be officially our sister." Ichigo choked on his roll and a large blush appeared on his face. Tsukiko smirked. "I would definitely like that." Ichigo had to change topics immediately and he asked them in mock dramatics, "What do you two have planned today? Why, I'm off working my butt off." Akira giggled lightly while Tsukiko rolled her eyes in amusement. "We don't have anything planned. We'll just be home all day," Akira answered him. Ichigo sighed in relief that they were no longer talking about matching him up with Mikasa. "That sounds kind of boring," Ichigo said thoughtfully. "Aren't any of your friends available today?" "No, they all have things to do." Tsukiko shrugged. "You have been working every day for a year straight, don't you have a day off anytime soon?" "You should have the day off today, brother." Akira gasped in delight. "We can have a family day." "Yeah." Tsukiko agreed, her eyes shining with rare glee. "We haven't done that in ages." Ichigo rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Talk about being double-teamed. The idea was very tempting and he could easily go to the smithy and tell his boss he was taking the day off. However, they had recently been given a large order that needed to be completed within the next few days and he had a responsibility to get it done. "Sorry, but I can't take today off," Ichigo said guiltily. It made him feel even worse when he saw the crestfallen expressions, but he had learned over the years to take his responsibilities seriously. However, not only Did he have a responsibility as a worker, but he had one as a big brother as well. I promise you that I will take a couple of days off later in the week. Really? Akira's excitement returned fiercely. A couple of days? Tsukiko asked with barely concealed hope. Ichigo nodded fiercely with a large grin. Yes, I will. I am due after all. I promise. Yes. This is going to be so much fun. Akira cheered loudly. Ichigo quickly finished off his breakfast and looked at his sisters nervously as they were talking to each other excitedly in hushed whispers. Ichigo had no doubt that they were discussing the things that they were going to be doing with him on their family days. He hoped that he didn't have to have another tea party with Akira and her dolls. Alright, you two. Ichigo began gaining their attention. I better go. The quicker I start, the earlier I can finish. He stood up and in a flash, Akira had bounded over to him and she hugged him tightly. He gave her a gentle squeeze before releasing her. He then threw his right arm over Tsukiko's shoulder and gave her a swift and soft kiss on her forehead. His youngest sister wasn't one for heavy physical comfort, so Ichigo made sure they were soft and quick. Stay out of trouble, okay? Ichigo told them sternly. Okay, brother. They both replied in unison. As Ichigo walked down the street towards his job, his mind took him back to his sisters teasing him about Mikasa. Since their mom had died, they had no female figure in their life. It had really only been him and their uncle. They relished the chance to get to know Mikasa when he had brought her over one day so his sisters could meet her. Mikasa went out of her way to come over to their place just to spend time with them, and it was one of her qualities that Ichigo appreciated immensely. Hey brat. Are you heading to work? Ichigo turned to his left to see his uncle Kyan leaning against a wall with his arms folded across his chest. He has aqua green eyes and spiky raven black hair. Like all military soldiers, he wore a short light brown jacket, a light-colored shirt and a dark brown sash around the waist covering his hips. He wore white pants and dark brown knee-high leather boots. Strapped around his waist was his 3D maneuver gear. On both of his shoulders and the front left pocket was a symbol of 2 roses, which indicated that he was part of the garrison forces. He was considered a prodigy and that people believed that he had the same potential as Captain Levi from the Scouting Legion. Yes, shouldn't you be at work, old man? Ichigo retorted. I am at work. Kyan shrugged easily. So standing around and doing nothing is work? Ichigo said dully. My job is to guard the walls. Do you see any titans around? Kyan smirked at his little nephew. Then shouldn't you be on the walls? You know, to make sure that the titans don't get in. Ichigo pointed out in annoyance. It's no wonder Eren hates the garrisons. They really are lazy. First of all, my little nephew, my shift on the wall isn't until this afternoon. Kyan smirked at him. Second of all, the titans haven't breached these walls in 100 years and that isn't going to change. You should know how quickly things can change, uncle. Ichigo told him emotionlessly. Kyan flinched and his tone changed into a more somber note. I know that, Ichigo, believe me, I know. However, the highest ever size of titan ever recorded is 15 meters. The walls are 50 meters tall, they simply can't be breached. If they could be breached, it would have happened by now. I hope you're right. So, have you thought about moving into your house? Ichigo cut him off. I'll give you the same answer I give you every time you ask me that question. No thanks. His uncle Kyan asked him that question almost every day. Ever since his mom had died, Kyan had taken it upon himself to help look after his brother's family. He always offered them a place in his house which was close to the Wall Maria, while Ichigo's house was close to the front gate of the Shiganshina district. He always said no because he wanted to raise his sisters in the house that their mother and father worked hard to get. So will you be over again tonight? Ichigo asked his uncle curiously. Yeah, I'll bring some pasta for dinner tonight. Kyan informed him. That sounds good. Ichigo grinned at him, you know uncle, you're going to find it hard to find a girl if you spend all your nights out our place. Kaien blushed, shut up brat and get to work. Are you blushing uncle? Is there something you want to tell me? Ichigo smirked teasingly at him. I may have met someone. Kaien muttered. What? Ichigo shouted, when? About 6 weeks ago. Kaien said sheepishly. 6 weeks, you've been dating her for 6 weeks and you haven't told us. Ichigo retorted annoyed. Do you know how excited Akira and Tsukiko will be to meet your girlfriend? I know. I know. Kaien raised his hands in surrender, the reason I didn't tell any of you was because I wanted to be sure that she was the one for me. I didn't want Akira and Tsukiko to get attached just for us to break up. Ichigo sighed and he nodded his head in acceptance. Okay, I understand. I take it you reckon she is the one if you're mentioning her now. Kaien nodded, yeah, I'm in love with her. So when are we going to meet her? Ichigo asked his uncle curiously. How about we have dinner tomorrow night? I'll cook up something special. Kaien suggested. Okay, that sounds good. I got to get to work. Ichigo yelled before he sprinted off towards the blacksmith. Kaien watched his nephew run off with a sad smile. Ichigo had been forced to grow up so quickly and he had tried hard to try and keep Ichigo's childhood innocence. Unfortunately Ichigo was the most stubborn person on the planet and so he swore that he would do whatever it takes to help his remaining family. All of his friends that had met Ichigo were astounded to see how happy and cheerful he was considering that he lost his parents and was responsible for his sisters. However, what they didn't know, something that not even Ichigo's sisters and mother knew, was how depressed Ichigo truly was after his father died. He was the only one that had seen the despair that the loss of his brother had on Ichigo. Ichigo would put up a fake smile in front of others including his sisters and mother in order to not make them worry about him, but that all changed a year ago. It all changed the moment Mikasa came into Ichigo's life. Even after Ichigo's mother had died, Mikasa was able to help Ichigo overcome the loss and vice versa. For the first time Ichigo had someone in his life who truly understood his pain. Mikasa had her parents taken from her, in similar circumstances compared to Ichigo, and she had the strong longing to protect her new family. Mikasa made Ichigo truly smile once again and Ichigo found the strength to move on. Satoshi, Izumi. I promise I will protect your children. Evening. It had been a long and grueling day for Ichigo Kurosaki. After the meeting with his uncle, he arrived at the blacksmith and he began making the large order of horseshoes. Fortunately it seemed that luck was on his side today. He had talked to Frederick, the owner of the smithy and his boss, about some possible time off. Once Frederick learned that he had worked a year straight, he was quite forgetful after all, he had been granted a week off. Ichigo grinned tiredly as he walked up a hill towards his house, a whole week, he thought exuberantly. He couldn't wait to tell his sisters. Shut your damned mouth. Ichigo looked up to see 3 familiar idiots bullying a boy with a round face, framed by his blonde hair, and he has round blue eyes and a pudgy nose. He wore a long-sleeved suit-like jacket with a collared shirt, long dress pants and dress shoes. Ichigo scowled at the sight of his friend Armin being held up against the wall by the leader of the 3 idiots. He was further incensed when the boy raised his fist to punch Armin. Hey! Let him go, you bastards! Ichigo shouted out instinctively. He successfully gained their attention, but in hindsight he didn't make a good decision. He had just spent 8 exhausting hours in the workshop creating horseshoes and he ached all over. He didn't have the strength to fight back, but seeing his friend being harassed brought out his instinct to protect. Look who is here. Have you come for a beating, Kurosaki? The smallest one taunted him. Ichigo scoffed amused, you 3 have never beaten me in a fight, what makes you think that you can beat me now? The leader sneered, your clothes seem quite dirty Kurosaki, were you working hard at the smithy today? The cocky look on Ichigo's face faltered for a moment and a gleam of triumph appeared on each of the bullies' faces. "Stop it." Another loud voice interrupted them and the group of bullies spun around to see a boy around the same age as Ichigo and Armin running towards them. He had a fairly long, yet rounded face, and sizable, teal-green eyes. He has short dark brown hair with his bangs falling naturally into a middle-parted curtain-type style. He wore brown trousers, a green shirt with string tassels at the collar, a maroon coat and simple brown shoes. "Hey, look, it's that fool. He wants to his butt kicked. We get to smash Jaeger and Kurosaki in the one day." Their excitement turned to horror however when they suddenly noticed the girl that appeared behind Eren with a dark look on her otherwise pretty face. She wore a long white one-piece dress with a pink jacket, white shoes, and a red scarf around her neck. On her left wrist was a bracelet exactly like the one Ichigo wore. She had long black hair and black eyes. Ichigo watched in amusement when suddenly the three bullies ran past him in fear from the look on Mikasa's face. He couldn't blame them. Nobody would want to deal with a pissed-off Mikasa, especially when she was protecting one of her friends. Eren came to a stop just in front of Armin and he was panting heavily from the heavy sprinting. He grinned and said victoriously, "Ha! They ran away when they saw me." Ichigo rolled his eyes and Armin piped up after he got back onto his feet, "No, they ran away when they saw Mikasa." Just as the young blonde boy took a step he fell to his knee in pain causing Eren to hold his hand out towards him in concern and he asked, "Hey, are you okay, Armin?" Armin looked at the hand and he shrugged it off stubbornly, "I can stand on my own." Mikasa ignored the interaction between Armin and Eren and she turned to Ichigo with a small smile, "You finished work for today then, Ichigo?" Ichigo grinned at her, "Yeah, it was a long day but totally worth it because now I've got a whole week off." "Are you serious?" Eren interrupted, "I can't even remember the last time you had a day off. He had a week off a year ago just after I started living with you." Mikasa told her adoptive father. It was a week that she could remember clearly. For a couple of days after her parents' murder, she felt completely numb. Eren and his parents gave her a home but it was Ichigo that lit up the darkness in her heart and allowed her to feel again. Whenever the darkness would creep up on her again, it was always Ichigo's smile that kept it at bay. It helped that their origins were quite similar. Ichigo, his family, and she were the last of the Asian race. "What are you planning to do for the week?" Armin asked curiously. "I'm going to spend most of it with my sisters. I haven't spent as much time with them as I would like and also my uncle is bringing his new girlfriend over for dinner tomorrow night." Ichigo answered him with a grin before he turned to Mikasa, "Oh yeah, that reminds me, Mikasa. My sisters wanted me to bring you around more often, so are you free any time this week?" Mikasa nodded, she did enjoy spending time with Akira and Tsukiko after all, "Yeah, I can come over any time." "Thanks Mikasa." Ichigo grinned at her. Riverside. The group of four decided to head down to the river so they could enjoy the scenery while they talked. Armin sat at the top of the staircase and he was telling Eren, who sat on the ledge with his feet hanging, about why they were bullying him. "So I said that humanity should go out into the world someday. And they hit me and called me a heretic. DMN it." Eren scowled and he threw a rock into the river. "Why does everyone act like you're crazy if you want to go outside?" "Because staying within the walls has brought peace for 100 years. Armin responded, "They're afraid that if many of us venture out, we'll risk letting them in. So the royal government declared any interest in the outside world taboo. That's our lives we're risking, so it's our business." Eren spat annoyed. "You can't." Mikasa said bluntly from her position on the stairs. She sat at the bottom of the stairs near Ichigo who was leaning against the wall underneath Eren. "Come to think of it, why did you tell my parents?" Eren questioned her angrily. "Tell your parents what?" Ichigo asked curiously. "Mikasa told my parents that I want to join the Scouting Legion and she knew full well how my mother would react. I don't remember ever saying I'd help." Mikasa retorted calmly. Ichigo grinned tiredly at her. He easily understood her intentions. It was an older sibling's job after all to do whatever it took to protect their younger siblings, no matter how much their younger siblings hated them for it. He had to make decisions that his younger sisters didn't like, and he had to cop their anger. He didn't hear any more of his friend's conversation because he began to doze off as his body succumbed to its weariness. "Wake up, King. You don't have any time left. You need to call out my name. If you want the power to protect your family, then you need to call out my name. Now shout it out, my name is Dash." Ichigo gasped and his eyes shot open when he felt somebody shake his shoulder fiercely. His eyes looked into the appealing black eyes of Mikasa before he noticed that a lot of people seemed to be rushing off somewhere. "What's going on?" Ichigo asked Mikasa. Something crashed into the ground outside of the wall and caused an earthquake. Mikasa told him with a raised eyebrow, "I'm amazed that you slept through it." "Yeah." Ichigo muttered and he quickly rubbed his eyes. There was something different about the dream this time. This time he felt a power well up within him along with a familiar name at the tip of his tongue, but with the sudden awakening he lost it. He shook his head and he got to his feet. "Let's go see what's going on." It only took them a couple of minutes to reach a courtyard where a group of people were looking towards the front gate of the Shiganshina district. There was a large amount of steam rising just outside the wall, and then, to everyone's horror, a large head appeared out of the steam. It completely lacked skin on its face and its hands were grasping the top of the wall. "This can't be." Armin shouted fearfully, "The wall is 50 meters high. It's one of them." Eren gasped in a mixture of horror, fear and awe. "A titan." Uncle Kyan said that they only get 15 meters high. Ichigo murmured dreadfully. "So how can one stand above the wall?" Armin finished. "It's moving." Eren shouted. All everyone could do is watch in terror as the actions of the Titan became clear to them all. It kicked through the gate and sent a large amount of rubble crashing into houses close to the wall. "It's blown a hole through the wall." Eren yelled terrified. In place of the gate, there was a large hole big enough for all normal-sized Titans to easily walk through. Panic couldn't properly describe the pandemonium that erupted from the people in the Shiganshina district as they all tried to flee to Wall Maria. "The Titans are getting in. Run to Wall Maria. Quick, or the Titans will devour us." Eren bolted in the opposite direction from the crowd and he headed towards the hole in the wall. "Eren?" Armin shouted in confused terror. "My house is in that direction, my mother." Eren responded without a glance and Mikasa and Ichigo immediately followed. Armin attempted to follow, but he was forced to grab his right shivering arm and his fear enveloped him and he shouted, "It's over, we're all finished. The Titans are going to devour us all." Mikasa followed Eren towards his house as quickly as she could, but as they came across a fork in the road she glanced at Ichigo who was running beside her. In this moment she had never felt more conflicted. Eren would turn left at this turn while Ichigo would turn right and she didn't know who to follow. Mikasa owed a lot to Carla Jaeger and she was like a second mother to her, but it was Ichigo that had saved her. Also Akira and Tsukiko were like the sisters that she had never had. When she sent another concerned glance in his direction her eyes met his and Ichigo gave her an encouraging nod. Mikasa immediately knew that he was giving her the okay to follow Eren and she gave him a small grateful smile. When they reached the fork in the road, they split up in different directions and Mikasa gave a guilty glance back at Ichigo. She hoped that he and his sisters will be alright and that she wouldn't regret her decision. "DMN it." Ichigo snarled furiously while running as quickly as he could towards his house. His fear and desperation made it so he could no longer feel the fatigue that he had built up from work. He had to save his sisters. This can't be happening. Why does this have to happen? It only took him a few moments to reach his house and what he saw shocked him. Two Titans that must have been at least 9 to 10 meters tall stood over his broken house and both his sisters were lying unconscious under some light rubble. Hey you bastards! Ichigo shouted furiously and he sprinted towards them. If you want something to eat, I am right here. To Ichigo's dismay, the two titans ignored him and they were more interested in the two unconscious girls. Seeing this made Ichigo's fury increase and his hazel eyes had a flash of blue, and suddenly the titans froze when they were reaching down to pick up his sisters. The titans freezing created an opening and two figures appeared behind them and they hacked away at their necks. Both titans collapsed to the side and their corpses avoided landing on Akira and Tsukiko. Ichigo's eyes widened when he saw who landed on the ground near his sisters. It was his uncle Kyan, and an appealing woman that he had never seen before. She is a appealing young petite woman in she brown kempt hair, long enough to reach her neck, and she wore the standard garrison uniform. Kyan quickly checked his two nieces and he was relieved to find that they were just knocked out and they had no serious injuries. We have to hurry, Kyan. The mysterious woman told him, more will come any moment. I know, Enka. Kyan said hurriedly before he looked over at his quickly approaching nephew, Ichigo. Thank goodness you're okay. Your sisters are fine. Thanks uncle. And Ichigo hesitated for a moment as he was unsure of the woman's name. Enka. The woman said stiffly. Just as Kyan was about to instruct Ichigo on what to do, the ground began to shake and they all looked towards the gate to see a group of 12 to 15 meter titans heading towards them. Kyan glared up at the approaching titans and he thought incredulously, since when do large titans walk in groups? It's as if something is drawing them here. But what could it be? There are 3 of them. Enka shouted, we have to get out of here now, Kyan. I'm almost out of gas. DMN it. Kyan swore, Enka, please get my nieces to Wall Maria. What about you and your nephew? Enka demanded, however she didn't hesitate to grab both girls. It was going to be difficult to maneuver with both girls, but she had confidence in her abilities. I'll hold them off. Kyan informed her, and then he told Ichigo, Ichigo, I need you to run to Wall Maria as fast as you can. Don't look back and don't try to help me. Just run. Enka will take care of your sisters. Enka gave him a quick but passionate kiss before she shot into the air by her 3D maneuver gear, and she took the unconscious forms of Akira and Tsukiko with her. Go now, Ichigo. Kyan demanded, and he launched himself at the titans. He only had enough gas to last him a few minutes, so he had to use it efficiently. Ichigo bolted back down the road as quick as he could, but he couldn't stop himself from looking back to check on his uncle. He watched in awe as his uncle took down the 15-meter Titan and the 14-meter Titan with some amazing speed and acrobatics with the 3D gear. Ichigo's awe turned into sheer terror, however, when the 12-meter Titan grabbed onto one of his wires and Kyan was slammed heavily into the ground. His uncle's blades all spilled out onto the road and one of them slid near Ichigo. Uncle! Ichigo shouted and he skidded to a stop. Kyan groaned painfully on the rocky road and he struggled to get back to his feet. He clenched the left side of his torso and he believed that some of his ribs had been broken. It was astounding that he was still alive, but it had been fortunate that when he had killed that last Titan, he had already been close to the ground before his wire had been tugged. DMN it, he swore mentally as the Titan approached him. I'm not going to die like this. However, to his astonishment, the Titan simply walked right past him, but that astonishment didn't last long when he realized where it was going. It was heading straight towards Ichigo. Were they after Ichigo the whole time? Kyan thought incredulously, but why would they be drawn to him? Ichigo was completely torn. A part of him wanted to run in fear, but another wanted to help his uncle. He was surprised when the Titan simply walked past his uncle until he realized that it was heading straight towards him. The Titan was only a few meters away from him and it allowed him to get a good look at its face. The Titan appeared to be male with a disfigured face and long black hair, but it was the crooked smirk on its face that really caught his attention. He could have sworn that he had seen it before. It was the same one that the man wore back when first met Mikasa. Seeing it again suddenly brought up pent-up feelings that he had suppressed. The same feeling of weakness that had enveloped him after Kai had been killed resurfaced back in him. If he didn't do something then his uncle would be killed and he was sick of all of this CRP hurting the ones that he cared about and being powerless to stop it. Darkness began to creep into his vision and hatred, anger, and desperation filled in his being. Ichigo didn't notice that black energy suddenly began to leak out slightly from his pendant and it rose to his face. When the Titan was close enough to Ichigo, it reached out towards him but suddenly froze because an invisible pressure pushed down on it. Kaien, who had managed to get up onto his feet, was forced back onto knees from the pressure. Ichigo picked up the blade that had slid over to him. He didn't even notice that it had no handle and that he grasped the end that connects to the handle of the 3D maneuver gear. The blade pierced into his hand and BLD began to leak out but Ichigo didn't flinch from the contact. Ichigo, whose head had been lowered, lifted it up to face the Titan and a skull-like mask had appeared on the left side of his face. It was white with 3 red lines on its forehead and 2 under its eye and above its jaw. "I'm going to kill you." Kaien had seen many things in his life. He had seen both appealing things and horrendous things. The world that they lived in was made up of the two. The day that his brother had died from the plague and the day where he found his sister-in-law's corpse were the most horrific things that he had seen. However, the darkness, that those horrific scenes inflicted, was kept at bay with the appealing things that he had seen. His appealing girlfriend and the nights that he made love to her. His adorable little nieces and the pride he had in his nephew. They made it worth living in this tough world. Right now, however, Kaien didn't know whether he was witnessing something appealing or horrific. Ichigo just seemed to explode with power and he could feel the invisible weight of it trying to crush him. He saw some kind of broken mask form on the left side of his nephew's face and Kaien felt a shiver go down his back at the sound of Ichigo's voice. "I'm going to kill you." Kaien could only watch in awe and fear as Ichigo simply threw the blade that he had picked up straight into the Titan's right eye. The giant screamed out in pain. It was fortunate that this one seemed to have a low tolerance for pain, and then Ichigo sprinted past the Titan. It definitely wasn't Ichigo's natural sprint, however, as he was running at a pace that Kaien had never seen a human run at before. Ichigo skidded to where there were 2 blades lying on the floor and Kaien saw that, once again, Ichigo didn't flinch when he picked up the blades. Ichigo cackled loudly, "This isn't what I meant when I told you to call for me, King. Still, I may as well have some fun." Kaien noted the steady BLD that was running down both Ichigo's hands now, but his concern for Ichigo's injuries didn't last long because Ichigo just performed another marvelous feat. The young boy simply jumped high onto the Titan's back and before the Titan had the chance to try and shrug him off, Ichigo slashed both blades at the weak spot and the Titan fell forward dead. All those times that Kaien had told Ichigo about the Titans and where their weak spot was seemed to have paid off. Ichigo jumped off the corpse and onto the floor and Kaien saw that he was panting heavily and that he had some of the Titan's BLD on his hands. It was a dead giveaway with the small amount of steam leaking out of his hands. SHT. Kaien had Ichigo mutter, "Sorry King, but your body right now is just too weak to handle this power." As Kaien tried to contemplate just what Ichigo was talking about, the mask on Ichigo's face broke away, his eyes, that had been yellow, reverted back to their natural hazel color. Ichigo collapsed onto the ground and Kaien felt the force pressing down on him lift, much to his relief. Kaien gingerly got back to his feet and he trotted over to his unconscious Ichigo as quickly as his body allowed him. Kaien, with some difficulty, picked up his nephew and he flung him over his shoulder. The rumbling footsteps signaled Kaien that more Titans were approaching and Kaien knew that they must have felt that force generated from Ichigo. As he ran, albeit a lot slower than he normally would due to his injuries, Kaien's thoughts were firmly on his nephew. He had no idea what that power was that he had displayed, but all he knew was that a 9-year-old boy killed a 12-meter-sized Titan without the use of the 3D maneuver gear. Not only was it critical that he got his nephew to safety, but Ichigo could be a key to defeating the Titans in the future. Kaien looked back over his shoulder to see a few 10+ meter titans converging at Ichigo's house, and Kaien knew that he needed to fill up his empty fuel tank. Titans were drawn to large groups of people, and that is why the Shiganshina district had been created. It made it easier to man the wall. However, they were drawn to the power Ichigo exhibited like they were drawn to large groups of people, and Kaien had to wonder if there was a connection between the two. Fortunately for Kaien, he was able to find a relatively full gas cylinder. The unfortunate thing was that it had to come from a fellow comrade and good friend to him. His name was Dave, and Kaien saw that he had been killed from some of the rubble that had been flying in the air from when the huge titan had kicked the gate. A large chunk of timber had pierced his neck. "I'm sorry, my friend," Kaien murmured sadly as he swapped his almost empty cylinder for the full one. The first thing that he did was to rip up some of the wire from his deceased friend's equipment, and he tied Ichigo onto him securely so it would be easier to use his 3DMG. Just when he had finished connecting the new gas cylinder, Kaien heard a loud and fast rumbling noise coming from behind him, and he quickly spun around to see a 9-meter titan charging towards them. That must be an aberrant, DMN. Kaien swore mentally, and he quickly shot into the air thanks to his 3D maneuver gear, and he managed to get on top of a building much larger than the titan. That was close. Kaien sighed in relief. His relief didn't last long, however, as suddenly the roof shook fiercely and large cracks began appearing. The building lost all stability, and Kaien realized what just happened. The aberrant was so desperate to get them that it simply ran through the building and it began to fall apart. Kaien fired his right grapple hook onto the building a few meters away, and he propelled himself into the air just as the building crumbled to the ground. He then headed straight towards Wall Maria without any difficulty thanks to the remnants of the building falling on top of the aberrant, which slowed it down immensely. "You and I are going to have a long talk when this is all over, Ichigo," Kaien murmured as he swung through the air. Wall Maria Gate. Mikasa had a firm grip on Hannese's right hand as he led them through the Wall Maria Gate, and Mikasa glanced to her right where Eren had a strong grip on Hannese's other hand. Eren's eyes were wide and emotionless, and Mikasa's would be too if she wasn't so concerned about Ichigo, Akira, and Tsukiko. It was because of her worry for them that prevented her from falling into the dark pit of despair from Carla Yeager's tragic death. Mikasa had to admit that she was afraid of how her foster mother's death will affect Eren. She had personal experience on what it can do to someone, and so did Ichigo. However, Mikasa couldn't find the right word to describe her foster mother's death. Seeing her being eaten was the most horrific thing that she had ever seen. This world was cruel, both man and titan were cruel forces of the world. Up ahead she could see a large crowd of people all surrounding the edge of the river bank, and they were trying to get onto a large ship. Preventing a steamroll of people charging onto the boat was a squadron of garrison soldiers. "Hannes," a familiar voice shouted, which caused both Hannes and Mikasa to turn back to see Kaien landed gracefully only a few meters away. Eren didn't react, and instead he just kept staring emotionlessly ahead. Mikasa's eyes widened when she saw that Kaien was holding an unconscious Ichigo, and fear began to consume her, especially when she noticed the blood dripping down his hands. If Kaien had only brought back Ichigo, did this mean that Akira and Tsukiko had been killed as well? Mikasa didn't think that she could handle it if something had happened to them too, and she knew that their deaths would destroy Ichigo completely. "Kaien." Hannes gasped in relief at the sight of his comrade. "Is Ichigo all right?" Kaien nodded, breathing heavily. "Yeah, he is just unconscious, but he needs some medical attention to his hands." Hannes nodded. "He can get some on the boat." "What about Akira and Tsukiko?" Mikasa spoke up with unconcealed concern. "They're fine, I think." Kaien answered her, much to her relief. "Hopefully Enka got them here safely." "We don't have time to talk," Hannes said hastily, and he glanced towards the open gate. Any moment now, the Titans might appear at the gate, and Hannes wasn't about to let these kids' deaths be on his conscience like Carla's. "Let's get the kids onto the boat quickly." "Can you take Ichigo?" Kaien asked him. "I need to go help any stragglers." "Are you sure?" Hannes asked him worriedly. I don't have a choice. Kaien snapped, my job is to protect the people inside of these walls from the titans. If I don't at least try, then I will never be able to look at myself in the mirror again. I've had a nice and lazy job until now. I have to perform my duties. Hannes reluctantly nodded. He had to admire the courage of his friend. Courage that he wished that he possessed, then he might have been able to save Carla. Okay, I'll take him. Kaien nodded gratefully and he handed his nephew over to Hannes, and the blonde-haired soldier noticed the wounds on Ichigo's hands. With a close-up look, it was easy to tell what had caused those injuries. Did Ichigo get these wounds from the blades that we use? Hannes couldn't help but ask him. Yeah, he managed to kill a 12-meter titan. Kaien informed them solemnly, much to everyone's shock. That statement caught Eren's attention and his once emotionless eyes snapped over to Kaien, and Ichigo's uncle could easily identify the burning hatred within them. Mikasa was focused more on Ichigo and her mind wandered back to when he had saved her from those robbers. Afterwards Ichigo had insisted that he didn't remember killing two of the men, and Mikasa had to assume right now that something similar happened. He is just a kid. Hannes stuttered in disbelief and he looked at the young boy that he was holding in wonderment. I know. Kaien sighed heavily, that is why you have to make sure that he makes it to safety. If he can kill a titan at his age, just imagine what he will be like when he is older. That's a good point. Hannes acknowledged, make sure you come back alive, you got that. Kaien nodded with a smirk, yeah, I'll be fine. Get going. As Hannes dragged them all off towards the boat with Ichigo in his arms, Mikasa glanced back to see Kaien swing up the wall. She really hoped that he came back for Ichigo's sake. Shiganshina District. Kaien had immediately leapt back into the fray when he swung over Wall Maria, and he managed to slice through a couple of smaller titans. He still couldn't believe that this was happening. Houses were smashed into rubble. There was blood flowing on the ground, and the stench of the titans and the dead bodies was easily the vilest thing that had ever hit Kaien's nose. He flipped onto the ledge of a building to regain his breath and he scoured the area. Fortunately he couldn't see any titans heading towards the gate from the flanks, and he could hear the sounds of cannon fire coming from the gate. No doubt they were being fired at titans that were heading straight towards the gate. He took a moment to think of the power that his nephew had unleashed. He wasn't really in a situation where he could think about this clearly, but he couldn't get it out of his head. He decided not to tell Hannes about Ichigo's power because he didn't want the higher-ups, especially those within Wall Sina, to discover this power. While the titans needed to be destroyed, especially now that they can breach the wall, Kaien also knew that humans could be worse than titans. While the large humanoid monster were deadly and powerful, they were predictable. All they do is devour and kill humans. It was their nature. Most of them anyway, aberrant, were strange, after all. Humans on the other hand, weren't so predictable. Some might try to use Ichigo's power for their own purposes, or some that will fear his power and try to have Ichigo killed. Kaien swung around for a few more minutes and he didn't find any more stragglers, and so he decided to fall back to Wall Maria. When he approached it hurriedly, he noticed that they were already closing the gate. What are they doing? There aren't many titans that have reached the wall yet. So why are they closing it? Kaien thought, confused. The answer came immediately when he heard the sound of powerful footsteps, and judging by how fast they were going, Kaien assumed that whatever it was sprinting. He shot towards it quickly, flipping over buildings and sliding through alleyways until he came across an unbelievable sight. He landed on the ledge of a building and he saw a large and powerful titan charging towards the Wall Maria gate. Kaien thought that it must be at least 15 meters tall. Its whole body, except the muscle tissue behind its knees, elbows, and its feet, is covered in hardened skin. Even from the top of the building, Kaien could feel the tremors that were created from the armored titan, and it didn't take much brain power to realize just what that titan intended to do. SHT. Kaien snarled and he shot towards the armored titan as fast as he could. He managed to get within a few meters of the Titan and he knew that this was his only chance. In order to go at the pace to catch up with the Titan, Kyan had to expend most of the fuel in his 3DMG and with a fierce roar he spun and slashed at the Titan's neck with his two blades. Unfortunately he didn't manage to connect because he was suddenly slammed in his right side and he crashed onto the top of a small building. Now. I can't let you do that. Kyan groaned painfully, his ribs are throbbing before he looked up at the person that had interfered land on the ground a few meters from him. His clothing is casual in the form of a pair of black trousers and a white shirt with a black jacket. However, the noticeable features are that he held a katana with a black guard in his left hand and he wore a strange-looking mask. Kyan noticed that his mask is similar to the one that had formed on Ichigo, but this one looks like some kind of black tiger or panther. The most staggering thing was the hole in the middle of his chest. His jacket was zipped down to the middle of his torso and his white shirt was cut around the hole. Kyan could see through to the other side. How could that be possible? However, Kyan couldn't see the person's hairstyle because it is covered by the hood from his jacket. That was suicidal of you. The Titan's armor completely protects it and all you would have accomplished is shattering your blades. The masked man mocked him. Today, the Titans are the victors, there is no stopping it. Well, I probably could, but I won't. Kyan only had to wait a few seconds before the meaning of what he is saying to sink in. The sheer volume is enough to get his attention and with wide eyes, he looked over in the direction that the crashing sound came from. In place of the wall Maria gate is nothing but a large hole and Kyan could easily see the frantic people through it and the boat that he hoped the rest of his family is on. Why? Kyan whispered in horror before that horror ignited into pure unadulterated hatred. Why? Despite that mask, you're human, aren't you? Kyan's furious response is suddenly cut off when a hand closed around his neck tightly and he is lifted into the air. I am more than human. The man growled furiously, my boss wants Wall Maria to fall and so I will see it done. He threw Kyan back onto the roof of the building and he kicked Kyan's blades away. Who? What are you? Kyan gasped in the air as he massaged his throat. I'm one of the few humans that have evolved beyond the normal capabilities and my boss and brethren are going to take over. We will control the world. The man informed him. Kyan didn't think of the reason why he is getting his answers so easily and he asked furiously, how can you control the world by allowing the Titans to break through Wall Maria? Isn't it obvious? The stranger laughed, have you seen what has become of humanity? If Kyan could see his face, he would be sure that the man is smirking. However, he knew exactly what he is talking about. He has been guilty of it, the laziness and arrogance that humanity had succumbed to. They actually believed that they wouldn't have to worry about the Titans again. I don't know how these walls were put up. The stranger admitted, I do know though that they weren't put up for us to hide behind them. Humanity had the chance to prepare and grow stronger but instead they all accepted that they were safe inside the walls and they wouldn't have to worry about the Titans at all. They had 100 years to prepare to fight back against the Titans and they blew it. Now we are going to take over. We are going to obliterate the way humanity currently is along with the Titans. You still haven't answered my question, why did you stop me? The stranger rolled his eyes in annoyance, do I have to spell out everything? With our current numbers we can't defeat the Titans and so we need the rest of humanity to sharpen up. We will use all of you to defeat the Titans before we take over. So you're going to sacrifice thousands of people just to sharpen up humanity for your own purposes? Kyan groaned in revulsion. The stranger scoffed, not my own purpose. I am simply following my boss's will. Besides, you defend all of these people including the royal family, but what do you think is going to happen when the people of Wall Maria all fall back to Wall Rose? What do you mean? Kyan retorted. The space within Wall Rose is far smaller than Wall Maria, with all of these refugees coming in, supplies are going to be short, aren't they? In fact, it will be too short. There is no way humanity can survive with the people from Wall Maria fleeing into Wall Rose. So what do you think they will do to rectify this? Kaien didn't give him an answer because the question's answer is obvious. It sickened Kaien, but he knew that it will be needed to be done. I take it by your silence, you know, so how can you defend them knowing what they will do to all of those scared and weak people? The man asked mockingly. Shut up. Kaien spat angrily. It is horrifying, but for humanity to survive it will have to be done, but what you're doing is different. You just said that you could have prevented it. For humanity to survive, the masked warrior asked in disbelief, you did not just say that. What about it? It's the truth. Kaien snapped angrily at him. Until the moment that armored titan smashed down the wall Maria Gate, humanity wasn't worth saving, the masked stranger snarled furiously. 100 years behind this wall and humanity couldn't even come up with a half-decent evacuation plan. Kaien flinched at the man's retort and he couldn't come up with a sufficient reply because he knew that it is the truth. That's how bad their arrogance had been. You're just like the rest of humanity. No, you're more like the definition of humanity. The masked warrior spat, such potential and yet you are lazy and arrogant. Although considering that you are here and that you tried to kill the armored titan shows that you do not lack courage. So you're not completely worthless. Still there are very few humans that possess that courage and that time is now over, Kaien Kurosaki. Kaien's eyes widened, how did you know my name? I learned it after I investigated your nephew, Ichigo Kurosaki. The stranger answered him. Kaien frowned in confusion when he detected the unconcealed venom in the man's voice and he wondered why he seemed to detest his beloved nephew. Why? Why would you investigate Ichigo? Kaien asked in confusion. Do you remember those men that he killed a year ago? One of them was my big brother. The man informed him coldly, it's my responsibility as a younger brother to avenge my older brother. I'm not going to let you. Kaien growled as he got back to his feet, I will protect him. You don't need to worry about him, yet. The man informed him coolly, I have some principles and one of them is that I don't kill children. So he still has a decent 5 to 6 years before I come for him. You, on the other hand, will die here. The reason why I stopped you from attacking that titan, was because I wanted to kill you myself. Kaien didn't even get the chance to prepare a defense before a large beam of red energy pierced his chest. Kaien collapsed onto his knees and he fell forward and he desperately braced the rooftop with his hands to keep himself from collapsing completely. In a few seconds since he collapsed, he coughed up a large amount of BLD. He desperately sucked in big breaths of air but it all proved futile because he choked on his own BLD. The man lowered his hand before he simply vanished before Kaien's blurry eyes. No matter how desperately he tried to get back up, he needed to warn and protect Ichigo from this man and he needed to warn Commander Pixis about this. DMN it. Get up. Kaien thought determinedly and he futilely tried to get back to his feet but all that did is make him cough up more BLD. Darkness began to creep into his vision but he kept persisting. I have to protect him. Kaien thought desperately but darkness began to creep into his vision and his limbs started to get numb. BLD poured from his chest and soaked the rooftop. Satoshi. Izumi. I will protect your children. Kaien swore but no matter how strong his resolve was, his body wouldn't respond and his arms gave out which caused him to crumple face first to the roof floor. In the end, Kaien Kurosaki bled out. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Disco Stu09 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye.